In Europe, containment works. No major European nation became communist during the Cold War. Unfortunately, that record of containing communism fails in Asia. Our first loss is going to be China, which is going to be communist by 1949. In order to understand it, you need to make sure that you understand 20th century Chinese history. To do that, you need about 2 semesters worth of classes. We don't have that. Instead, I'm going to give it to you in a few minutes. A thumbnail sketch at best. At the beginning of the century, China was still under the imperial rule of the Manchu dynasty. But it was weak and it got weaker, and in fact, by 1912, a revolution would create a republic in China, at least on paper. The party that created the revolution and the republic was called the Nationalists, led by a man named Chiang Kai-shek. In the 1920s, the Nationalists are going to be challenged by the Communists, this party led by Mao Zedong. And a contest will be developed between the two sides to see who's going to control China. By the mid-1930s, however, a third party comes in. That, of course, is going to be the Japanese. When the Japanese attack China, the nationalists and the communists come together and they're going to oppose the Japanese. So from 1937 to 1945, the nationalists and the communists cooperate with one another in order to beat the Japanese. But this alliance was uncomfortable and it was not going to last a second longer than it had to. As soon as the Japanese were defeated in 1945, the nationalists and the communists are going to go and maneuver against one another for power. The war ends in 1945, and the United States needs a policy to deal with China. And we essentially have three, at least theoretically, three options to follow. The first option could have been, well, whatever happens in China is the business of the Chinese. We have no business doing anything with it. Or we could have gone the other way around and employ U.S. resources into China in order to stop them from going communist. Then, of course, there's a third option. Try to go partway. Try to get these two sides to cooperate with one another while remaining friendly with the United States. This is the option we're going to follow. Now, of course, it doesn't work, but realistically, what could we have really done? Do you think the United States is going to, particularly its people, are going to be willing to put in American resources, American soldiers in China to stop it from going red? I'm not really so sure they're going to be able to do that. So when the war ends, we try to get a unified government in China. We get the two guys together, Mao and Chiang, and they're going to have face-to-face meetings to create this unified government in China. Now, unfortunately, we're also going to ferry nationalist troops all over China to key strategic points. So the communists are going to look at it and go, wait a second here, you're not playing fairly with us. You're not being impartial. So to compress and make a very complicated story simple, by 1947, a civil war is going to emerge within China. Within 2 years, the nationalists, despite the fact that they're more numerous, better equipped, and had control of major cities, thanks, of course, to the United States, they lose. One of the problems was that the communists had ways of gaining support that the nationalists did not. Communists do not broker any kind of dissent, so going as far as killing people who disagreed with them. And of course, the nationalists don't do this. So in 1949, Chiang Kai-shek is actually going to flee with the remnants of his government and his army to Taiwan and establish what's known as the Republic of China, and vowed to conquer the Chinese mainland once more. He's going to create what's known as nationalist China. Mao Zedong is going to control all of mainland China, and they create what's known as the People's Republic of China. It's a communist state. And of course, the Red Chinese are going to be bitterly anti-American. In fact, U.S.-Chinese relations are not going to normalize until the presidency of Richard Nixon. When China goes communist, it's regarded as a major Cold War defeat. The reactions in the United States were bitter, especially amongst the Republicans, since the Democrats were in control. They started saying things like, we lost China because the Democrats were soft on communism. Politics as usual. But don't be fooled. If the shoe was on the other foot, I guarantee that the Democrats would have done the same thing. It does raise one important question, though. Did containment apply to the Far East? That's a good question. It's not clear. It wasn't clear since China had become communist, yet Taiwan was not. What about elsewhere? Wasn't clear, was it? Then something happened in 1950 that made us determine that we were going to comply containment to Asia. And that, of course, is going to be a major war in the peninsula of Korea.